Hello guys and welcome back to another DNF1 live stream watch along. This weekend we are here watching the Spanish Grand Prix qualifying session. As always, I am your host Adam Burns, and joining me on this edition of the DNF1 live stream here at Barcelona is my co-host, or one of them for the podcast. First time on the live stream, it's Lee Wallington. Lee, thanks for joining us on the live stream. How are you doing? And congrats on your debut on the DNF1 live stream. How are you feeling?
Thank you. Right, it's a long time coming, that's for sure. I kept missing it. Keep having Formula One qualifying when I'm doing other things. It's really frustrating. But yeah, I'm looking forward to this session for sure.
And of course, guys, if you are new to the live stream, make sure to say hi to us. And we're so glad to have you along with us for the DNF1 live stream of Spanish Grand Prix qualifying. And of course, if you are new to the channel, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, like the video. It really helps us out a lot. And of course, if there are anyone else that wants to follow live stream or follow this live stream or watch qualifying with us, they're more than welcome to do so. Just so, yeah, say hi in the chat. And Lee, with that all out of the way, it's quite an exciting prospect because we talked about this on the preview with Sean Kelly, and upgrades seemed to be the name of the day. And there was a lot of emphasis on who is going to benefit the most from these upgrades. And based on what we've seen from free practice, and this appears right now to be no false dawn, which is great news, it looks like we might have Mercedes in the mix as well.
Yeah, the anticipation of a potential three-way battle for qualifying will set up, I'm sure, a very interesting race tomorrow.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm just looking through the practice times as well, but they were fast on Friday. And, you know, we saw this in Miami that Mercedes looked quick, particularly George Russell, fastest in FP2 on Friday. And then in FP3 in Miami, it started to fade away. Those issues with the porpoising started to come back. And in qualifying in the race, they were quick, but they were still some way off the likes of Ferrari and Red Bull. This weekend, however, it's quite the opposite. Mercedes look like, from what they've done on their upgrades to the car, that they've eliminated the porpoising issue. The car looks fast. The engine is obviously looking competitive compared to other races. All these issues that have seemed to have plagued them so far, for the most part, it looks like they've gone away or they've found a solution, which can only be fantastic news for the fight at the front, to see Mercedes right up there back with Ferrari and Red Bull, where I think we can all agree that they belong.
Oh yeah, it's what we want is the top teams fighting it out. At the end of the day, we want I can't remember the last time we've potentially had it's going to be Mercedes are going to be fighting for the championship, but a three-way fight for pole position potentially. Although I think that's probably pushing it for Mercedes a little bit to get a pole position, but it's still going to make it an interesting session.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, you know, we'll get into some other topics from some of the other teams later on, but sticking with Mercedes, just looking at some of the predictions, as you guys can see in the corner, you can see our three predictions, myself, Lee's, and Courtney's as well, another host on DNF1. Quite some interesting predictions. And Lee, yours is certainly the one that jumps out to me.
Yeah.
You've got Verstappen on pole, followed by both Mercedes and Hamilton and Russell. So, I mean, you got to talk me through that one, Lee. What's going through your mind when that prediction came out?
Well, I'm fully. I obviously probably will be wrong, but my thinking is I'm expecting Mercedes upset, because obviously we're talking about a Charles and Max title fight at the moment, and then all of a sudden Mercedes appear to be on the pace or close to being on the pace this weekend. So I fully expect them to unleash some extra last bit that they've not used in free practice. But also with Lewis, when Lewis is at his best, either when he's on the back foot and he's coming back for a bit of revenge, so to speak, or when he's happy and he's in the sweet spot, and you see how he's talked in the interviews and how he's handling himself, Lewis looks really happy. They're probably the happiest he's seen so far this season. And I mean, a happy Lewis could potentially be dangerous, and if he's filled with one with the car, and you know, Lewis can unlock a magical lap time, just like Max can, and Charles, and you have that perfect lap. And I mean, George is pretty fast as well, so I wouldn't be surprised that, yeah, as I said, an upset may be on the cards.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's almost there's always been a sense of inevitability around it with Mercedes, and I think I want to sort of draw back on what Matteo Binotto said at the start of the season when Ferrari looked very good after testing. And, you know, the consensus was that Ferrari had the best car by some margin. And I think Matty was the one who said that, you know, this is probably because if they were the fastest at the time, that he felt that everybody was a bit behind him in terms of time that was available to develop the car, and that the likes of Mercedes and Red Bull would eventually catch up to Ferrari around 3 months afterwards. We're kind of at that point now, Lee, and not so much Red Bull, but emphatically Mercedes have obviously found something amazing with this upgrade, and there could be more to come with this car concept as well, so it certainly does bode well. But looking through the other predictions, we've got myself there going with Charles Leclerc on pole. I think that's a pretty solid shout. I know I'm a bit biased because it's my own predictions, but Leclerc's been fastest in all 3 practice sessions. That Ferrari does look very quick in qualifying. Will it prove to be fastest in qualifying? We'll have to wait and see. Particularly in Leclerc's hands, it looks quite handy. The race pace is also going to be quite important, so I think that's a pretty solid shout. You've got Verstappen there in P2. I think that would be the most likely front row going into this race. You've got Sainz P3, who was a little bit off in FP3, but he's proven to come quite close to Leclerc in qualifying when it matters most. And then you've got George Russell and Lewis Hamilton. And George seems right now, Lee, that whilst Lewis is certainly finding himself with this car again, even George still is managing to retain that half a tenth of a second that he seems to have on Lewis right now. Do you think that's something that will transpire into qualifying again now that Lewis seems to be much happier with this upgraded Mercedes?
It may well transfer into qualifying. It could be as much as it pains to say it. Lewis is a bit older than George, and that could be just sheer reaction time. It may not be. I mean, we all generally know as drivers get older, they get slightly slower. Not that Lewis is slow by any means, but that could be all the difference it is. It's just a matter of age between the two. But as I said, just going to be such an interesting session.
Yeah, very much so. And qualifying now just over 5 minutes away. And for those of you that are new to qualifying, just to quickly go over the format, we have 3 qualifying sessions, Q1, Q2 and Q3. There are no tyre regulations this season. So just a reminder, in Q2, you will not start the race on the tyre that you set your fastest time on. That rule has been removed. So they can set their Q2 times on whatever tyres they like. And then Q3, they can go again on, well, different tyres or the fastest one they can do. But in Q1, 18 minutes of running. The slowest 5 runners will be eliminated from qualifying. Then we'll go to Q2, where 15 cars will go through. The next slowest 5 will then be eliminated, where we'll have our top 10 shootout in Q3, and that will decide the order for the race. Just let us know where you're watching this live stream from, wherever you are following us from around the world. We have quite a lot of followers from all over the place when we had the Miami qualifying session. So let me know, guys, if you are watching, where you are watching qualifying from. You can see a Wild Kev in the chat saying we have a sellout crowd this weekend. And yeah, Barcelona, a circuit where the fans have finally come back for the first time in a long time. Obviously, owing to what's been happening with the pandemic, it's been quite difficult for them. And, so it's great to see a lot of fans coming back to the circuit, and I'm sure they'll be looking forward to seeing Carlos Sainz if he can get a good result in qualifying and maybe even the race as well, and also Fernando Alonso. Just a quick note on Ferrari League, because a lot of people have been saying that Ferrari looked the fastest in qualifying, and it seems with the upgrades that will continue, at least for as far as the odds go for who's going to be on pole position this weekend. But despite what we saw this morning from Charles Leclerc, which looked a bit more encouraging, is there still that concern that Ferrari may have issues with their tyre deck, which could hinder their race pace, which, most circuits, it could be a problem. This one, maybe not so much, but even still, that is something Ferrari need to keep an eye on if that is the case.
Yeah, I definitely think Ferrari's biggest concern is going to be their tyre usage based on what we've seen through free practice, be it tyre warm-up or tyre degradation. The Red Bull and Mercedes did look to have a much better tyre life than Ferrari, and that could still be key, less so today than tomorrow, but still be key for tomorrow. But I think that this circuit is probably the most important for pole, as Sean said earlier in the week. So if Charles gets on pole, tyre life may not be so much of an issue.
Yeah, absolutely right. We'll have to wait and see how that works out in Spain. Usually it's not the most exciting Grand Prix, it must be said, but I think it was quite key for Ferrari, and I know I keep banging the drum about them, but in Sector 3, that's where they seem to be very mighty in the slow corners. And given that in a straight line from what we saw in the speed traps at Red Bull and even Mercedes, who've proven to be the fastest in the speed traps so far in practice, maybe that is a result of their new power unit that they brought in this weekend. I'm not sure if it's an upgraded one. It's a fresh one, so that could prove to be important. But of course, limiting the porpoising and allowing the car to run low is obviously going to help them. But Ferrari obviously facing a deficit in a straight line compared to Red Bull and Mercedes by the looks of it. So it's going to be very critical for them to come out of this final sector with a bit of a margin to sort of allow them to defend going into turn one. I mean, how critical will that be for the race for you?
I think it's for the race to be very critical, especially if the Mercedes or Red Bull get into a DRS window. It obviously makes it easier for them to potentially overtake. But as Sean mentioned earlier in the week, is you get past, if a Red Bull now a Mercedes potentially gets past a Ferrari, it'd be very hard for them to overtake with that straight line deficit.
Yeah, absolutely right. And just let you know, guys, of course, in the past, if you've watched live streams of qualifying, you'll know that I normally ask for no spoilers owing to a delay. I can gladly say now that I've managed to sort that out. So I am watching the live broadcast on Sky F1. So if you are watching that too, then you're more than welcome to comment in free time. I shouldn't be a minute or 90 seconds behind like I was last time. So you guys, if you aren't watching qualifying and you're following it with us, which of course is fantastic, then you'll be happy to know that we are going to be live with everyone else. So you won't miss out on anything, or you won't be behind in this case. But let me know, guys, in the chat. It's not very active at the moment, but let me know in the chat, guys, where you're watching this from. What are your predictions for qualifying as well? I mean, we've been talking about our top six, which looks like it's going to be Ferrari, Red Bull, Mercedes. There's quite a margin to those behind. We saw Lando Norris put in a really good lap for McLaren, which was important for him because he's had a lot of issues. He's not been feeling fantastic, had some issues with his chassis. I think him and Sainz had some changes made overnight with the chassis, but Norris done really well to get back into a good position. Magnussen looked fast in FP3 as well. So what about you, Lee? What are your predictions for the remainder of the top 10? Who are you looking out for? I know there's one team that I'm very curious to see how they get on, but I think we'll get into that as this session goes on, as we're about to get underway.
Well, I think for me is, what magic can the home favourite of Fernando Alonso do? What magic can he unleash from that Alpine? Obviously, you go back a few years where he won the race. Was it from fourth in the grid with that brilliant start?
Yes.
Into turn one. Obviously, that was back when he was in Ferrari. But it's Fernando Alonso. You wouldn't put anything past him. So that's the real big question, which obviously the fans there at the circuit would be cheering Fernando and Carlos.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Alpine have looked okay, but I mean, Fernando's been quite unlucky of late, but they've been well in their top 10. Ricciardo was a bit better, close to the top 10. We had Magnussen, we had Bottas, of course, Ocon looking handy as well. We're just about to get underway for qualifying, so just momentarily waiting for that timer to go on the broadcast. Just be any moment now before we go green. I'm just looking at some of the chat as well, just seeing Chris Welch. Hello, Chris. Yep, we're good. Hope you are doing well as well. Munsey Talks as well. That was a channel I appeared on quite recently, and we have got underway. The clock was a bit late, so I'm just going to adjust that. So just bear with us. But Quali 1 has just started as we're watching Valtteri Bottas in the garage. Just waiting for that, and there we go. And that's the timers there. I'll sort of muddle that up just a little bit. Let me fix that. You have everything going so well, and then it's one little bit gone. But anyway, I'll play around with the clock whilst we're watching qualifying. Anyway, we've got I think it's Guan Yu Zhou that's come out on circuit first. So,
or very quick Valtteri.
There we go. Well, yeah, or very quick Valtteri. No, it's definitely Guan Yu Zhou, so don't worry about that one. But there we go. That's all fixed, or sort of fixed. Never mind. Anyway, back on track. Qualifying has just started, and we've got Guan Yu Zhou out on circuit with 17 minutes left to go on the clock. You're watching the DNF1 live stream qualifying session here at Barcelona. Don't forget, of course, if you are new to the channel, to like the video and subscribe. That really does help us out a lot. We'd really appreciate that, as we're seeing Lewis Hamilton getting his final checks before he straps into that Mercedes and gets going. It's going to be really exciting to see how he gets on. But Lee, one team I'm curious to look out for whilst we're just watching Pierre Gasly go around, and that's the team that needs a good weekend as well, AlphaTauri. But I'm curious to see what Aston Martin can do, because for those of you that have been following will know that Aston Martin released their B-Spec car, which both, I'm glad to say, Stroll and Vettel are going to be running this weekend, not just Lance Stroll as we suspected. But it looks very similar to the Red Bull, doesn't it? And there was a lot of movement over the winter break for team personnel. We had Dan Fallows, one of the head of aerodynamics, and a few other key aero people at Red Bull going to Aston Martin, which, given the fact that the FIA did an investigation on this Aston and it proved that they had designs of this back in November, should clear them for that. But there's been that talk about whether or not the Aston Martin is legal. Sorry, I'm just seeing Pierre Gasly, the smoking coming out the back of his car, but he seems to be okay, so he's going to crack on anyways. He starts his first flying lap. But yeah, on the front of Aston Martin, there seems to be not necessarily espionage like what we saw between Ferrari and McLaren back in 08, but or 07, I should say, but more around theft of intellectual property, for lack of a better way of putting it. And there seems to be a controversy around that. So what are your thoughts on this one, Lee? Bearing in mind that this is the team that got in trouble for something very, very similar with Mercedes when they rolled out the pink Mercedes a couple of years ago.
Well, I mean, at the moment, obviously the FIA have cleared them of any wrongdoing, but Red Bull have announced an internal investigation about the potential theft of IP. And Dr. Helmut Marko has obviously said there has been intellectual property stolen. I don't know how he knows that when the investigation's just started. So, but that's Marko for you with his outlandish claims. But
yeah, I'm convinced, Lee, that they just stick a microphone in that guy's motorhome and they just report whatever he says, what's going on in there, because some of the stuff he comes out with is madness. It's almost like he deliberately wants to trigger people.
Well, not that Aston Martin are looking good for pole, but just imagine the upset it would have been if it was through free practice, it was Aston Martin 1-2, 1-2, 1-2 through the free practice. Or there would be an uproar regarding theft of IP, that car, they can't do that. And that hasn't occurred, but you wouldn't say put it past them for that Aston Martin to improve and be specifically faster than they have been in the last few races.
Well, I remember you saying this to me the other day, that no one's really going to care unless that Aston Martin is fast. I mean, they might care in the short term because, you know, it looks so similar. I mean, it's even the small facets of it, like the little chunks of the floor that are sort of cut out.
Yeah.
And then you've got the sort of the veins at the front end of the floor as well, like little intricate details that are almost a carbon copy, pardon the pun, of that Red Bull. It's scarily similar. I mean, yes, teams can come up with similar concepts, I'd be very surprised if that was just merely coincidence. I mean, there's too many intricate details on that Aston Martin that are very similar to the Red Bull that it just can't be coincidence. I mean, look, Christian Horner did make the point that there were people leaving and there's going to be some knowledge that you can't expect them to forget that because of how long it's gone into working in these cars. But that is something's very, very strange there. And I don't think Red Bull are going to let that go. That was funny in practice when they were all drinking green cans of Red Bull. They definitely love to stir the pot, those guys. Anyway, look, we're back to the qualifying, just watching Sergio Perez now on his first flying lap of the session. And yeah, I'm expecting this one to be fastest. Just seeing the chat as well. Chris is going in there saying, looking promising for Mercedes. That's what we want. 3 teams going at it. Absolutely. We certainly want to see that. Mundy is going with top 3. He's going with Leclerc, Russell and Verstappen. So an equally bold one as well. Courtney's gone with that as a top 3. Not necessarily in that order, but it's a solid one. And Chris has gone same top 5 as me. So I like the way you think, Chris. But let me know, guys. Anyone else watching this, let us know what you think. And, of course, don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you are new. Perez now coming through the final sector. 6 temps up on Guan Yu Zhou, so this time should be well into the 120s. Lee, do you think we're going to see any times in the 118s this weekend for pole? We look like Leclerc looked about half a second off in practice, but I'm sure the track ramps up. We should find a bit more time.
I wouldn't be surprised if we just start to dip into the higher 118s in Q3. It may just be in the low 119s. But yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if you have a Max bonsai lap or something that you don't, where the hell did he get that time from? That wouldn't put it past Max to do that. So, well, obviously that's my prediction for Max being on pole. So.
Well, I was just watching Perez just going fastest now for 120.4, 6 temps clear, and nice little tactic that Red Bull were doing there, where you had Perez giving Verstappen a nice tow as he just sets back to start on his first lap now. He's through sector 1. He's quarter of a second up on Perez. So that could be a tactic we might see from a few teams where they might alternate when their cars go on their flying laps so that they sort of meet in the middle when the first car finishes his lap and the second one is about to start their one. So that could be a tactic. Might be something Ferrari might try to pull off, although Ferrari in the past that have tried pulling tricks like that haven't necessarily got the timing right, or the drivers have sort of. Do you know what I mean? If anyone remembers Italy in 2018, they did it the wrong way round, and then Raikkonen ended up getting on pole instead of Vettel. And of course, anyone that watched that race knows how that sort of fell apart after that one. But Verstappen, purple sector 1, purple sector 2, navigates that Ferrari with relative ease. Won't want to get in his way, especially how close they are. They don't want any grid penalties for blocking. Verstappen coming across the line. This should be in the 119s, I reckon. And he just misses out, 120.0 for Verstappen. But that probably will get him through to Q2 relatively comfortably. I mean, this is one of those circuits that doesn't necessarily ramp up too much, I would say, in terms of grip. It's usually fairly consistent. Just watching a replay of Stroll almost going into Norris there. A bit of an unsafe release, but fortunately Norris saw that one coming. As we're now watching Carlos Sainz, the hometown favourites. A lot of fans, a grandstand was built, I think, for Carlos Sainz for the benefit of this race. So obviously the Spanish crowd looking forward to seeing their boy in red. Hopefully he'll have as much fun as their previous hero last time when he was in a red car. But Sainz now middle sector. Ferrari have been mighty in that middle sector as well, must be said, especially Leclerc and the final sector as well. And that could be key for Ferrari over the course of this lap, because this is a circuit where the tyres do tend to burn up over the course of the lap. So you really got to balance out when you use your grip on those tyres. And the Ferraris, as expected, looking pretty handy in this early stage. Watching the Sainz go across the line, and that should be fastest, and he is. First man into the 119s for Carlos Sainz. Leclerc was just under a tenth off him. Hasn't set a purple sector. Coming across the final corner was a little bit slidey, or a little bit loose, but he's gone fastest now. So just 300s faster than Sainz. So good lap for Leclerc. Ferrari 1-2 at the moment. Red Bull 3 and 4. Looking pretty handy at the moment, would you say, Lee? As Norris goes fifth.
Yeah, they're looking pretty steady. I mean, I had no doubt about the pace in that Ferrari for over one lap. It's all our concerns are actually there in the race, but that's another day. There's pole position is pole position if you can get it.
Well, that's it, isn't it? I mean, I'm just watching Hamilton now come across the line. What's his first lap going to be? See where he is. So he slots in fourth behind Verstappen, just a tenth behind him, just under 4 tenths behind the Ferraris, as Russell goes P4 ahead of Lewis now, and he's 3.5 tenths off the Ferraris. He was purple in sector 1. So that Mercedes proving to be very rapid in a straight line. Just see Roger Federer turning up into the garage there. So goats, no goats by the sounds of it. But there we go. So Mercedes, as we expected, looking handy early on. But Valtteri Bottas in P6 as well. He's looking quite good, and looks like he's going to be the dark horse in the midfield. Up him and the McLarens possibly.
Well, you did see Sean say to keep out an eye for Valtteri when we spoke to him earlier in the week.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those sort of... This was saying, well, I don't think it was massively bold to say that. I mean, I was hoping for someone else, but in reality, he's right in a way, Lee, because Bottas, he's pretty much in a class of his own right now. I mean, the McLarens, when they're on it, they're there, but Bottas has been consistently in that position, and I wouldn't be amiss in saying that he probably will end up in P7, assuming that nothing goes wrong, unless he pulls something special out of the bag, which puts him into the top 3 rows on the grid. But I think you could argue that Mercedes may have cleared at least that hurdle at the very least.
Mercedes may not be in the same category as Red Bull, Ferrari as of yet, but they're a lot closer than they were in Miami. And I think they pulled themselves nicely clear of the midfield.
Yeah, and on a circuit like this, you certainly can't hide. If your car is good, it will show. If your car is bad, it will equally show. I mean, we can chuck in a caveat and say that this is a circuit traditionally when Mercedes have been strong. Hamilton's won here the last 5 times in a row. This is a Mercedes hunting ground more than anywhere else probably on the calendar. So I'm not saying that as a way to try and tone this down with Mercedes and say, look, they are at a circuit where we expected them to be good anyway. But it certainly is promising. If Toto Wolff was saying that they're potentially 3 tenths off, it could be closer than that, to be fair. But I think even 3 tenths off the lead car is still a huge step forward based on where they were in Miami and other races this season.
Well, you think the gap for most of the season so far has been close to a second, if not a bit more. So to say shave off 7 tenths in one upgrade, that's a massive gain for an upgrade.
Well, this is it, and these cars are brand new as well, so you're going to find more time than you will do in like in 2021
Yeah,
when these cars are very developed over a long period of time. So you're going to find those huge gains. But I think what's also been critical for Mercedes is these upgrades have allowed them to exploit latent potential and speed that they had in
yeah,
that car, but they just couldn't unlock for those
oh
reasons
yeah,
because of the porpoising and everything else. And the lack of consistency in the car. They look like they've managed to address that at the very least, and that's what's helped with this huge surge in performance. And let's not forget, Lee, Ferrari and Red Bull have also made steps forward. We don't
oh
know
yeah,
how much, so it's probably worth even more than 7 tenths. Maybe it is a second, and Ferrari and Red Bull have, without their upgrades, may find themselves behind Mercedes
yeah.
without them.
The only thing I think that's probably now worrying Red Bull and Ferrari, maybe although they wouldn't admit it, is if Mercedes have actually solved their issues. They've spent the last few months focusing on not upgrading their car, but resolving the issue with the porpoising. But if they've now resolved it, they can obviously now focus on actually developing the car going forward and unlocking more speed. And then we know Mercedes can develop a car. So in a couple of races, well, that gap will probably get smaller. That there's be out of the championship contention, but yeah, the Mercedes could be making it very interesting towards the mid-season.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it was important for Mercedes to get that right because I think Ferrari and Red Bull, you know, they obviously didn't want to see Mercedes struggling too much, but they would have loved it from a competitive perspective to see Mercedes think, right, this concept isn't working, we have to start again. And then that's pretty much season over in terms of trying to win races and world championships. And even at 2023, they've got to produce a better concept than what Mercedes and Ferrari have. Ferrari and Red Bull have when they've had over a year to work on the one that worked. So it's great for Mercedes. And I hope that this will bring them right into the mix. It certainly is what we all wanted from this new regulations. We wanted Ferrari back. We've got that. We want Mercedes there as well. We don't want Mercedes to drop off and be replaced by Ferrari. We want everybody there. And of course, the more teams involved in this battle, the better. But I think right now we've got what we were kind of hoping for, the three best teams in the sport, the three biggest teams in the sport, going hammer and tongs with each other. And hopefully that long may that continue.
Well, you should say you
Yeah.
got the three biggest teams and Valtteri with it.
Well, I mean, it would be nice for Valtteri Bottas
Well, he's
to
only
be
won
in there.
within half a second or so far in Q1 outside the
Yeah.
top three teams.
Well, this is it. I mean, Bottas is doing bits right now, and Alfa Romeo look like they've got a solid car. I want to be generous to Alfa Romeo because traditionally it's the Sauber team, and they've always been good at producing good cars in situations like this. I mean, do you remember 2008? They had a car that may have given Robert Kubica a world championship if they kept developing it after the Canadian Grand Prix. They decided to go against that and it went wrong. But it just shows that despite being a small outfit, they do have capable people in that group. And I hope they can keep up. But I just think resources-wise, not necessarily the money, but resources at the factories and that may go against them. But it just shows that Ferrari engine is quite handy as well in that car. So, no, it's good to see. Just under 3 minutes to go. At the moment, the bottom five, Albon, Stroll, Gasly, Mick Schumacher, of course, had that rear brake issue, that rear brake fire, similar to what Alex Albon had. Looks like they've managed to solve the issue, and he's out on an outlap, so that's going to be encouraging to see. The time on the bubble right now is Daniel Ricciardo, 121.2. You've also got Nicholas Latifi in P20 as well, who hasn't set a lap time yet. So we'll have to wait and see what he can do. But bit of a surprise, Lee, to see Aston Martin so far down the order when these upgrades, well, we thought it might bring them to the front of the midfield, but clearly there's a lot more to these. I mean, if they have copied Red Bull, there's a lot more to it than just slapping on some green Red Bull side pods onto that car.
Yeah, well, we all know that it's one thing developing upgrades and bringing them to the circuit, but completely another thing to understand and get the most benefit out of the said upgrades. So it may just be that Aston Martin don't fully understand their new car as of yet, how to maximize the best speed. Or it may be that it's not that good as we all think it looks.
Maybe they've copied the wrong car.
Yeah.
Maybe they should have copied the Ferrari, or maybe, you know, stuck to form and copied the Mercedes. You know, it's not quite worked out for them yet, and they look pretty handy in Miami pace-wise, but they look like they've... I mean, as I said, it's all relative. These upgrades, everybody's brought upgrades, probably with the exception of Haas to any significance. So, in a way, when you come to these circuits, you kind of hope, especially in this regulation change, that you might see a shift in the pecking order. But then more often than not, you end up with a status quo because everybody's sort of cancelling each other out with their upgrades. So It looks to be that way, with the exception of Mercedes, but then you could argue that, well, this is just unlocked latent performance in their car that they've always had. So, you know, they are roughly where they should be now. Let's watch Mick Schumacher now coming out to do his one and only flying lap. And, of course, great job from Haas to get that fixed, because it didn't look promising 2 hours ago when the rear of that car was on fire. Just watching where he goes through the S's at a circuit that his father was very successful. I think Michael won 5 times here or something like that. I think only Lewis has won here more times than Michael at Spain, and Ayrton Senna as well. See Mick Schumacher, he's just under a tenth quicker than Ricciardo, which is, you know, if Mick Schumacher manages to get this car into Q2 based on what happened to him in FP3 and did no running whatsoever, that is some feat. And this is a driver that really needs to put together a solid weekend, because he's quick, but he's not been consistent, and he's got to keep his car clean to pick up the points, which he's still yet to do in Formula One.
And he's losing that inter-team battle with the returning Magnussen. So, I mean, that puts pressure on Mick's drive overall.
Yeah.
Maybe Mick isn't as good as everyone thinks he is if he's losing to a returning driver.
Well, quite possibly. I mean, he's been quicker than Magnussen in Miami, who's been quicker so far this weekend when he has been able to do some running. So he does need to put that together.
Yeah.
He's really throwing it back in the final sector. He was 2 tenths up on Ricciardo. He was 4 tenths up on Magnussen. So this time may get him through as he goes across the line. What's it going to be for Schumacher? P8, 120.6. That's more like it from Mick Schumacher. Great lap. Magnussen, what's he going to do? Magnussen goes P5. Ooh. So Magnussen found a huge chunk of time in that final part of the lap. I thought Schumacher was up on him. Now we're at the bubble now, so there's nothing left on the clock. So everyone's doing their final runs. Stroll only 17th. Vettel, at the moment, the driver at risk as he comes through the final corner. Sebastian Vettel, can he get that Aston through into Q2? Only 13th, so he's not far off. Gasly now, P20. What's he going to do? Surely he's going to be able to get through. Goes P11. Tsunoda now drops in. Alonso is now the driver at risk. Looking who else is on circuit. Ricciardo is back into the top 10 for McLaren. Norris might be in trouble. Ocon might be in trouble as well. Tsunoda goes P12 ahead of Gasly. Ocon at risk and in the pit. And his teammate is on a flying lap as well, as is Alex Albon in the Williams. We'll have to wait and see as Albon fails to improve. So Williams will be dead last. But Alonso's being held up by Mercedes. Or is he giving up? No, he's giving up. Sorry. I do apologise. It looked like Alonso was on a flying lap, but it cut to him behind a Mercedes. But he obviously is giving up one up. So the home hero, Fernando Alonso, out in Q1, Lee. What a shock. 2 Aston Martins both out and the 2 Williamses as well. So we got just a confirmation of the bottom 5, Vettel, Alonso, Stroll, and the 2 Williams of Albon and Latifi. So a huge shock already, Lee. Fernando Alonso, and in qualifying, and arguably both the Astons as well. Despite their upgrades, they've gone backwards.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't expect the Astons to go out in Q1. But yeah, that Fernando being out, I mean, that's such a shame. Yeah, obviously, no driver wants to be out so early on their home Grand Prix. So it's such a shame to see Fernando out. But Ocon isn't far ahead either. So it's just the car doesn't seem to be performing as well as it has done in previous circuits.
Yeah, it's a strange one. But as we said, you know, at Spain, it's a circuit which really does test the car. And I remember back in testing, Alpine were claiming that they weren't pushing that car to anywhere near as good as it could be. And they were having issues with reliability in testing, which was preventing them from showing that pace and the DRS, etc. But now they've come here to the actual event in a car that you could argue in some regards was potential for being the kings of the midfield. And they're out in Q1, or at least one of their cars is out in Q1. And Esteban Ocon just about squeaked through as well. So big shock there. Aston Martin, as we've already just talked about, out in Q1. Big surprise there. It's a little bit disappointing as well, because I think Aston Martin, they have the potential and the personnel and the quality to be in at the very least, fighting with the likes of Alfa Romeo, Alpine, and McLaren, and in a way they are fighting Alpine, but not in the order where they want to be. But yeah, they would have hoped for a lot more than this after their big upgrades.
Oh yeah, I mean, why are Red Bull complaining? That should be their real
well, maybe they won't. Maybe they won't. You know, and maybe it proves that, you know, what's more important is what's underneath that's going on, because, you know, this is one facet of it and a few other bits as well. But if Aston Martin don't know how to work it, and you know, that maybe that's something that they should have looked into before they, you know. And I'm not accusing them of anything, of course. I should stress that this is all inferences rather than statements or opinions. But yeah, not certainly a lot more than just strapping on a couple of green Red Bull side pods onto your car, and it's not exactly made the car go that much faster, so to speak, at least. But judging for what we saw in Q1, Ferrari's looking very, very handy early days, and Mercedes backing up their pace that we saw in practice, which is good to see on that front.
Yeah, and the question is, do they have any more to bring? Is that the gap of 3/10, or is the gap going to get smaller as we head into Q2?
Yeah, very well so. I mean, we'll have to wait and see on that one. You know, and again, it could be one of those where they need to sort of learn more about their upgrades on how it behaves on their car. It may make their car act completely differently to how they expected. It is quite a substantial change. It's not like putting some newer bits on the car. It's, as you said, it's practically a new car in their opinion. So it might behave differently, and they need to do more to understand that. It's hard to say at the moment. But yeah,
agree there.
But I hope you guys are enjoying it so far. And thank you very much for tuning in if you are watching this live stream qualifying along with us. Don't forget to say hi and let us know where you are watching qualifying around the world. And if you are new to the channel, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. And as I said, we've got lofty ambitions. We want to try and get to 1,000 subscribers by the end of the year. And the only way that we can do that is if you guys join us on our journey and show us support. And we really appreciate that. Each and every single one of you. We hope you are enjoying watching qualifying with us. Let us know where you're watching as well from around the world. Always quite interested and keen to see who's joining along with us and where you guys are watching qualifying from. So we've got Matthew Binotto on the pit wall this weekend, which I'd love to know what he's saying, but we have to mute what's going on in the coverage so that Formula One management don't copyright this video for having their audio or the coverage on here, or Sky at least. So, yeah.
He's probably moaning about the Aston Martin.
Yeah, I think that's what it is. Matthew Binotto saying that Aston Martin is just, you know, absolute disgracefully fast. You know, they're just playing with us. They're about 3 seconds a lap faster than everyone in the race, and we're going to see it. All this is only, you know, this is all just a cover up just to make sure that no one appeals, and then out of nowhere they're winning the race by like 2 minutes.
I'm sure Lawrence would love that.
He certainly would, but I mean, there's been a lot of talk about, whilst we were waiting for Q2 to start, there's been a lot of talk about Audi trying to get into Formula One. They obviously are very interested in McLaren, and McLaren have basically told them it's not going to happen unless you want to be an engine supplier. You're not going to buy into the team and change it to Audi. It's always going to be McLaren, which I completely agree with. I think it's understandable. But what about Aston Martin? Because this is a team that Lawrence Stroll bought with a consortium, and obviously bought a lot of shares in Aston Martin so that he could race under the Aston Martin brand. Not necessarily represent the company, but of course with the brand name you kind of do anyway. But it's not exactly worked out for them in that regard. They've not exactly moved forward. They've gone backwards, if anything. And yeah, it's a very, very strange one. What would you do, Lee? If you're in Aston Martin, you're Lawrence Stroll right now, and things aren't really working out as the way you'd want to. Bearing in mind, in the medium term, they've got some huge reconstruction plans going. I'm just watching Alonso trying to deal with traffic, which obviously explains his Q1 issues. What would you do? Would you consider Audi's offer if they came knocking at Aston Martin's door?
Well, I think it depends on Lawrence's motivation, I guess. Obviously, if it's just a sheer business decision in buying a Formula One team, and you obviously want to return your investment, if your team's not performing well, you may look at selling part of the team. But if he's bought it so his son can have a drive, or would you want to risk selling a team if your son loses his seat potentially? As we all know that, I say we all know. I mean, I would say Lance isn't my favourite of drivers. So it all depends on his motivation and why he's in Formula One.
Yeah. Absolutely right. Just Q2 has just started now, guys. Obviously, they're a bit late on the broadcast when they put the clocks up. They're like halfway through the first minute, so that's why I've had to change it. But as you can see on the clock now, we've got 13 minutes and 45 seconds to go left in Q2. No one has gone out on track yet. And
they just want to make it difficult for us, Adam, that's all.
That's it. All the independent channels trying to make their way through and grow on this platform. And the F1 space is obviously growing and becoming more isolated with more independent creators, which is only a good thing. You know, we can't complain about that one, but, you know, throw us a bone F1 every now and then. You know, we're all fans at the end of the day. That's why we do this, just for the fun of it. But anyway, Let's see what he's got in store. No one out on track yet, guys. It's quite a hot day in Spain. Or Lee, you would know better than I would at the moment that it's quite hot in Spain most of the time.
Oh yeah, I mean, right now, I mean, the air temperature is somewhere in the 30s. Obviously, the track temperature is the most significant thing, which is probably in the 40s or low 50s. I can't remember the last figures they displayed for the current track temperature, but you're now getting into the prime. Well, it's not quite summer yet, but you try to tell in late spring from early summer in Spain, it's all hot.
Well, this is it, isn't it? It's just, but it is important because, of course, with hotter temperatures, it does affect tyre degradation. It does make it harder for some teams to operate in warmer conditions than it does for others. I mean, we've seen in colder conditions the way that some cars operate. And maybe that's something what we're seeing this weekend. When we went to testing, Barcelona was a lot colder than it is right now in as we're approaching summer. So maybe there is that element to it. Maybe that's why Aston Martin are struggling. Perhaps they're struggling in hotter conditions and they'll do better when it's a bit cooler. I mean, we just come from Miami, so it shouldn't be too much different. Although this is a circuit that does tend to push tyre degradation and tyre wear a lot more than others. As we're now seeing a Mercedes coming out the garage, I believe that was George Russell.
Yeah.
2 Ferraris sitting in there, waiting for the right window to go out on track. As we're going to Q2 now, Lee, who do you think's in trouble in Q2 at the moment? It looks like right now, I would say the drivers to watch out for are probably Ocon, Ricciardo, the AlphaTauris as well, and perhaps one of the Haas's maybe.
Yeah, I think I think both Haas's are going to be on the edge of the right or wrong side of the top 10. Although, if I was to say, I'd probably put Kevin more in the top 10 than Mick at the moment. But it's definitely going to be, I think, be a bit more of a challenge for Daniel. Just still struggling to get the same speed out of it as Lando.
Well, this is it, isn't it? Because there's been a lot of talk about US drivers, particularly Colton Herta, who has certainly made no secret of his intentions to want to drive in Formula One. McLaren does seem to be the team most likely to take him on if there is not going to be an Andretti team anytime soon, which seems to be the case. And of course, we've got the Indy 500 this weekend. No, is it this week? No, it's next weekend, isn't it?
Next weekend.
Yeah, it's next weekend. Sorry, I do apologise. Yeah, next weekend because it's on the same weekend as the Monaco Grand Prix. But we've got the qualifying session for Indy tonight. So that's certainly going to be interesting, as Colton will be involved in that. Of course, we've got Romain Grosjean, who looked pretty quick from what I could see when he was going around Fast Friday, doing 240 kilometres an hour around that circuit at one point. That is some insane speed. So after the accident he had a few years ago, he's certainly not deterred by going fast in the Indy Series. And that was a race that I think a lot of people were worried that he shouldn't take part in for safety reasons. But certainly looking good. We're seeing Lewis Hamilton now come across the line to start his first flying lap in Q2. No times on the board as of yet. Just under 10 minutes to go as we're now on board with a 7-time world champion, Lewis Hamilton, or Sir Lewis Hamilton, I should say now. That McLaren, not McLaren, force a habit there. That Mercedes certainly looking like, I've got to challenge Crofty here at this rate. This Mercedes certainly looking like it's on rails at the moment as Lewis does a 22.1, looking very quick. The Mercedes has been very quick in that opening sector, it must be said. It's the rest of the lap where they do tend to drop off. Do you think that's because they work their tyres a little bit more early in the lap, or do you think that's just the top speed that they've been enjoying that's given them that extra performance?
I think it's more towards the top speed that they can carry through from the straight into sector one. There's obviously, you listen to Toto earlier in the season, he was always like, our engine's fine, it's just drag, which we didn't believe too much. But if it's drag or they've done something to change the performance of their engine, it's now not as slow as it was regarding how it appears through the speed traps. So that's definitely an advantage that Mercedes haven't had yet this season.
Well, it's a nice little balance though, isn't it? Because now we've got 3 cars as Lewis really loose at the end of the final sector. Just coming across the line now, does a 1:19.7. So it's the fastest lap Lewis has put in this weekend. Purple sector 2 and sector 3. George Russell, purple in sector 1. What's he going to do? And he goes 3 tenths faster. 1:19.4. And that's up there with the fastest time that I think we saw Leclerc do in FP2 yesterday. give or take.
Yeah,
I'd have to
that's
have
the
a look.
fastest they've gone all weekend.
I mean, certainly the fastest that Mercedes have gone all weekend.
Yeah,
And
that's what I meant.
George Russell, once again, though, proving to seems to have the edge, although Lewis did make a mistake in that final part of the lap, which might have cost him a little bit of time all the way down to the final corner. I'm just having a quick look whilst we're watching Carlos Sainz and Charles Leclerc on their first flying laps to see what Leclerc's time was in practice 3. So bear with us, guys, on that one whilst I'm busy trying to sort all that out. But let's see. Yeah, so they're a little bit off in the middle sector, Leclerc.
Yeah.
No purples for Ferrari.
No purples. Oh,
so, well, again, it depends if Mercedes turn the wick up, as they so often have done.
Which is what I mentioned before we got into Q2.
May well be, maybe. But we'll have to wait and see. As Sainz now comes across the line, what's his time going to be? 1:20.3. So Ferrari, he's certainly had a sloppy first lap. Leclerc, and also another sloppy lap. He goes into P4, and Perez has gone in there as well. So Verstappen, what can he do as he comes across the line? He does a 1 minute 20.1. So Mercedes, so
What's
far,
happened?
Yeah, well, there we go. I mean, Mercedes 1 and 2 at the moment, and that will certainly be a welcoming sight for Mercedes fans that will worry that this was something they may not see for some time. But just looking at a replay of Hamilton, very loose and looks like he's lost a lot of grip. So perhaps he was pushing a little too hard in the early part of the lap. And it looks like he's lost that little bit of time that he might have had on Russell, and a bit more as well. So, yeah, those rear tyres certainly getting very, very hot for Lewis Hamilton there. But
Lewis definitely has more time in his lap. Not sure it's 3/10 that he lost, but that was very messy last sector there.
Yeah, so I'm just looking through practice times at the moment. So, yeah, that lap from George Russell was the fastest lap we've seen this weekend. Just seeing a piece of the husk coming off. So, yeah, George Russell certainly looking very good right now. And not only Ferrari seems to have a bad first outing, but Red Bull as well. I mean, we shouldn't worry too much yet if you were invested in Ferrari and Red Bull, because this is only Q2.
And it's only the first runs in Q2. If they may do another run just to set themselves up for Q3, to get. But they're probably all comfortable in those top 3 teams.
Well, the fact that we've got Valtteri Bottas in there as well, and Magnussen and Mick Schumacher are all very close to those times as well, would suggest that the Ferraris and the Red Bulls have got more. Although saying that, Sergio Perez had a clean run, and he had the best run out of all 4 of them. Yeah. So there's certainly more to come from Ferrari and Red Bull, but Mercedes showing their hand, and it's looking pretty handy right now. No pun intended.
And based on at the moment, obviously, you did mention Daniel looks struggle. He's on the wrong side of the elimination zone at the moment.
Yeah, you got Norris on the bubble in P10, Ricciardo just a few tenths off of him, and then we've got Ocon, Zhou, and the 2 AlphaTauris. Zhou's not been too bad, but as you can see, Bottas, he's more than a second clear.
It's a night and day performance between the 2 drivers.
I mean, I know we're talking about a rookie in his first season in F1, a decent rookie, but nothing that, anyone was writing home about as something potentially special, although, we can't judge him too much too soon, against a driver that's just come from a championship winning team of which he was involved in 5 seasons of success. So, a second is still a lot of time with all of those factors involved. And on the straights, you can see Russell nearly 3 tenths faster than Leclerc on the straights. That you can say what you want to say about that Ferrari power unit, and if you look at it and what people are saying, that it is the best power unit on the grid, but that Ferrari is still proving to be very, very draggy, and that whilst it might help him in the corners, it is costing him a lot on the straights. And ultimately, Lee, I would say that's probably been Ferrari's Achilles heel this season, that they just have too much drag on that car right now.
Well, I mean, I know it's a new car, new regulations, but over the last few years, Ferrari have always seemed to have suffered with too much drag on their cars compared to the Mercedes and the Red Bull. So maybe it's just something that they currently, well, obviously they have designed it into their car, but it's just something that seems to be in their design methodology, that they seem to be very draggy.
It's the red paint. It's got to be it's the only thing I can think of as a constant.
They got to strip it off to save weight and make it all we have all the cars all carbon fiber black.
Maybe. I mean, they could have done like gone in Miami and gone for a Miami Vice kind of Ferrari livery, like blue or bright white or something like that. So yeah, well, you never know. But it's something that Ferrari do have to look into. I mean, it's kind of a nice sort of dynamic we've got here with Mercedes, Ferrari and Red Bull, whereas you've got the Ferrari, which looks to be the best car in the corners, but the slowest on the straights. And then you've got the Red Bull that seems to have the best of both. And then you've got Mercedes that seems to be the fastest on the straights, but the slowest in the corners, or at least, certain characteristics of those corners anyway. So it all seems to come together right nicely. But yeah, right now, Mercedes looking pretty good. We've seen Haas sending out Magnussen for his final run. And yeah, this is shaping up very nicely. The packed grandstands here at Barcelona see Ocon trying to get past one of the Ferraris without going over the white line. So yeah, right now I would say if you were in a Mercedes or in a Red, or in Perez's case, you'd probably be all right. I mean, Leclerc will probably be okay, possibly, but I'm sure if you've got a spare set of soft tyres, you just want to go out there and try and hook everything up to make sure that you're ready for Q3.
Yeah, if you've got the spare tyres, it's probably worth just to get your last, obviously the grip changes, the track temperature. You want to get you in the right headspace, even if you're not going there for that time, just get a sighter of how it feels. It can be an important difference. But yeah, the top four are probably going to be safe. I doubt the track will improve that much.
Yeah, it doesn't normally in Spain. Like, usually after practice, the track's fairly rubbered in and you're going to get all the grip that you can get out of it. It doesn't have that track evolution on the same levels where we just came from in Miami or Imola, for example.
Oh, yeah. But yeah, it's going to be very close for those McLarens if they're going to be in the top 10. It's going to be... You could potentially see that both McLarens are going to be potentially outside, seeing how it goes with the performance of the on their last runs, obviously.
Yeah, just watching Carlos Sainz now shaping up for his final flying lap in Q2. A lot of fans here this weekend turned up to see Carlos Sainz in the Ferrari in the hope that he may be able to produce a performance on par with what Fernando Alonso once did in Ferrari not too long ago now. As he comes down the back straight, a sector that Ferrari have often been behind Red Bull and Mercedes for straight line speed at the moment, but it looks quite handy. I mean, that car looks on rails at the moment, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's fast, because that Red Bull and Mercedes are also looking equally impressive now as he comes through to finish sector 1, just under a tenth off of Russell, which isn't too bad at the moment. So looking quite handy there on this lap. Hopefully he can put it all together. While Sainz is going roundly, Sainz versus Leclerc has been an interesting dynamic that I think we've talked about less and less as this season's gone on, as Leclerc's rivalries seem to be invested in, like Verstappen, for example. What have you made of that inter-team battle going on? Because it seems like Sainz had at the moment, when it really matters most, mostly in the race, seems to give up just a few tenths to Leclerc, or at least enough where he's always coming off second best. I mean, how do you see that one going? Is it Leclerc really up in his game, or is it perhaps a bit of Sainz needing to do a bit more? Because he looked better in Miami, but he was still at least 5-10 seconds off his teammate.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting dynamic between the two. I think under last regulations, obviously it's probably a bit more close. I think as in talent-wise, I think Carlos is taking a bit more time to adjust to this car and the driving style required than Charles. But Carlos, I think, is a lot more consistent regarding the points he can bring. Really, he's had a bit of bad luck with his spins and crashes as of late. But he is more consistent level in his performance.
Well, he's fountain pace now, because he's just gone fastest of all. Only 17,000 faster than Russell. Magnussen goes P4. Tsunoda and Gasly fail to... Well, they have improved, but not enough, so they're definitely out. Zhou has improved, but stays 15th, so he'll be disappointed. Let's see what Ricciardo can do. He goes P9, so that pushes Norris out of qualifying at the moment. Schumacher currently on the bubble. Can Norris improve? He does. So he's now P7. Mick Schumacher has been eliminated from qualifying at P11 at best at the moment. Verstappen goes fastest. Purple sector 2, purple sector 3. That's more like it from the reigning world champion. Max Verstappen is through fastest of all, a quarter of a second faster than Sainz and Russell. Leclerc ended up abandoning his final lap by the looks of it. So, but he's safely through in P7. Perez stays in P6. So, Kevin Magnussen, the surprise there. Mercedes looking handy, but Verstappen and Sainz showing that Ferrari and Red Bull still have a little bit of pace in hand just to keep those roaring Mercedes in check for now, at least.
and both McLarens got through. So I was completely
No,
wrong
they
saying they're
didn't
not going to
actually.
get.
They didn't actually. I think. Am I wrong?
No, no,
Norris is
no. It keeps
P11.
changing. Yeah.
Yeah, Norris is
Yeah.
P11, Lee. So
Sorry, take that
yeah.
back. Sorry, guys. It's my.
Well, there we go. You said you needed an improvement from
Yeah.
Ricardo. Oh, Norris was through, but his lap time got deleted.
Okay,
The
that's
track
where I
limits.
was.
That's why. Oh
Yeah.
dear.
So I was right.
Well, no, you weren't, because he set an invalid lap time.
No, but I meant he was right. He was through until his lap time.
Yeah, he was. I looked at that and I thought, that's odd. So that pushes Mick Schumacher through as well. So both Haas's are through. So, well, there you go. This it's sad for Lando Norris, but Mick Schumacher, all due respect, done a great job. You know, he's still off Magnussen, but I think the fact that he had no free practice free, and that is only his third flying lap that he's had today. I think that's a very good job from Mick Schumacher, all things considered.
Yeah, and say on that time for Max, 119.2. You did say about 118s.
Well, we're close.
It's getting close, isn't it?
Very close indeed. So, well, at the very least, I think, you know, some Red Bull fans that are tuning into this or watching qualifying right now will be a little bit more relieved, because I think when George Russell and Lewis Hamilton put those times in and they were quite some margin ahead of everyone else, I think everyone was like, oh my God, has it really happened? Have Mercedes overhauled everybody with one upgrade? But there you go. But yeah, guys, let us know your thoughts on this one. Mercedes certainly looking the game, but Verstappen and Sainz proving there that Ferrari and Red Bull still, at this point in time, have the one lap advantage, or at least that's how it looks going into Q3. It could still change.
Did Lewis and George come out for a second run in P2? Or not P2, Q2. Sorry.
Yeah, I think they did. Oh no, they might not have done. Actually,
I don't think they did.
No, they didn't. But I mean, to be fair, looking how good, I mean, Russell's lap in particular, how good that was, it'd make you wonder if there was much more time on the table. Maybe there is. We'll have to wait and see. But it certainly looked like Ferrari and Red Bull were off where we expected them to be. So they obviously found some performance when they needed to. As I said, we'll have to wait and see. Maybe there is more performance in that Mercedes. Maybe. We'll have to wait and see. But Magnussen getting his car right in there as well, which is good to see as well. So Haas, despite not putting many upgrades on that car, it's looking quite handy around this circuit.
Oh yeah, it's looking. Well, you did say the circuit's a good performance measure of a car. There's been some ups and downs of that Haas over the last few circuits, but it's clearly not a bad car.
Well, no, this is it, because I mean, you know, a circuit like Miami that we haven't been to before is obviously going to throw a few variations in there. Being a street circuit and the natural difficulties there, we've gone to a very traditional circuit, a circuit where, you know, people know more. Probably the teams know more than any other circuit on the calendar. When you think about it, it does a lot more running there than any other circuit. So it's a circuit where I feel like if your car's good, you'll know, and if it's bad, there's no caveats. There's no getting around it. If your car is good there, then it's going to do well. If it's bad, it's going to struggle. So, you know, the Haas, they still have a very reliable package right now, and in Kevin Magnussen's hands, who's doing a great job once again. And as I said, you've got to give credit to Mick Schumacher, who had such a compromised weekend so far, and he's on very little running. All right, a bit lucky because Norris had his lap time deleted, which I think we're just about to see a replay of right now. It was on the exit of turn 12. I think he exceeded track limits. And, that's very close. It is very close. That's a borderline F1 2021 time trial track limits there. Where, I mean, it's a bit harsh. I'd have to see the replay of where his right front is. But unless it's something to do with, like, you know, as I said, I can't hear what Karen Chandok is saying, but I'm pretty sure he's explaining why that was considered track limits. But as I said, Lee, you know, great job for Haas, and Mick Schumacher doing a good job to get into Q3.
Oh, yeah. Well, now he's in the Q3. I mean, he comes to the race day, regardless, even if he qualifies 10th. The key thing for him will be scoring points. He's put himself in a good position to score his first points, be it if he qualifies 10th or higher.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, we'll have to wait and see what happens with Fernando Alonso, because he was impeded by Norris. I think there were some people saying that he couldn't actually get his second attempt going because he was held up by Norris and he lost out at the end when Norris was going very slow at the end. But Fernando in the pen with the media, he's had a lot to say this weekend, hasn't he, about the FIA and the stewards over that penalty that he got in Miami.
Yeah, he's not been a happy bunny, but he's made it very clear how he wants to get that third title. Um, Admittedly, I would love Fernando to get his third title. To be perfectly honest, wouldn't we all?
I mean, is it? I mean, realistically, is that got any legs? Because I just can't see it happening unless he ends up in a Ferrari, Mercedes, or Red Bull, and I just think that
Nah.
door's been closed to him for several years. Really, you could argue for as long as 2015, that door has very much been closed to him.
Oh yeah, very much so. But it doesn't hurt to dream about it, does it?
Well, I mean, if he's proven he's good enough and he's willing to sort of make that work, then fair enough. But I just think when you're looking at those teams, I just can't see an avenue and where
Nah.
that, unless he's prepared to wait until he's like 50 and still driving to that level and find an avenue there. I just can't see it happening really. I mean, maybe Mercedes, but no, I just can't really see that happening right now. But hey ho, you know, that's life.
Or, yeah.
You know.
Or maybe you got all these talks about, oh, he may leave Alpine and go Aston Martin, and if Aston Martin sort out their green Red Bull, he may be driving a very fast green Red Bull, wouldn't he?
Well, I mean, it's not looking very fast at the moment, is it? So that's looking like a very slow Red Bull as well. Just but there we go. It's just absolutely crazy sometimes, isn't it? But guys, look, let me know what your thoughts, guys. Who do you think is going to go on pole position now that we've seen Q1 and Q2? Mercedes very much looking like, I should say, they're in the fight until Verstappen and Sainz set those final laps in. We're just about to get started for Q3. So this is going to be quite interesting. Who's it going to be? Is it going to be, what do you think, Lee? Who's going to be on pole? Is it going to be Verstappen, Leclerc, Sainz, Perez, or maybe one of the Mercedes? Do we dare go for Mercedes to be on pole position?
I still go with Max as per my prediction, but the Mercedes are definitely going to be causing an upset as per my predictions. Obviously, I'm not going to say my predictions are correct, but I definitely think they're going to upset Red Bull and Ferrari somewhere.
Certainly somewhere. I mean, if I was going to place a bet, and I'm not a betting man for anyone that knows me, I'm very much against gambling in any sense. But, you know, it's one of those, I think if there is a driver that's going to possibly be compromised by the Mercedes, it's probably going to be Sainz or Perez. I think more likely Perez, because he has not really looked on it at all this weekend, Perez. He seems to have struggled for the most part. I'm curious to see what Leclerc can do, because he's been the guy that's been on it. He's been fastest in every session with the exception of Q2. So there's certainly more pace in that Ferrari of his. Sainz proved there's more pace. And if the gap between Sainz and Leclerc all weekend has been around 3.5 tenths, that alone would have been enough to make Leclerc fastest in Q2, assuming Leclerc would have done a lap that would have been 3.5 tenths faster than Sainz. So I'm still going to back Charles Leclerc. He's, you know, and when it's mattered in qualifying, Lee, I think you'll agree with me on this one, that this season, despite what some people say about Leclerc pushing a bit too much, he has delivered more often than not as far as qualifying is concerned. He's probably been the best qualifier so far this season. So it's, for me, I think it's got to be one of Leclerc or Verstappen. I think Mercedes will be very close. They're a lot closer than I thought they would be. I figured as this qualifying session would move on that Mercedes may fall a little further back, but they're in there. It could take, I mean, Russell looks the guy that looks more likely to put that Mercedes on a front row at the moment than Hamilton. He seems to have had the edge on Lewis all weekend, which is, I think, in a weird way, as great as Lewis Hamilton is, and that should never be forgotten. And look, I'm not riding him off, but Russell is really proving that he is the real deal in terms of what happens post Lewis Hamilton at Mercedes. He really is something special, and I'm glad we're finally getting to see this.
It's much more enjoyable seeing Russell this end of the grid than the last few years towards the back in the Williams.
Well, that's true. And, you know, no disrespect to Russell, but obviously with Albon performing the way he's been performing for Williams, a lot of people have been saying, well, this obviously diminishes Russell's achievements because Albon, I think it's a completely different situation. That Williams, competitively speaking, is a lot better than the one that Russell had to drive. And Russell still produced some great performances, but it doesn't matter now because he's in a Mercedes, and at the very least, he's on par with a 7-time world champion that's won more than anyone else in the sport. And that certainly can't be understated at all.
Oh, no.
Anyway.
Definitely not.
9 minutes left in the session. Hamilton now first on a flying lap. It's gone 22.0 in Sector 1. It's not the fastest first sector we've seen from Lewis. It's not the fastest we've seen from anyone. Only George Russell's really done better than that. The two Ferraris behind him on the circuit. Sainz green in Sector 1. Leclerc green in Sector 1. So they're a little bit off Lewis. We'll have to wait and see where that unfolds for the remainder of the lap. And of course, we've got the 2 Red Bulls and George Russell behind him as Hamilton does a 51.7 in the middle sector. Not bad, quite handy. We'll have to be interesting to see what happens when Sainz and Leclerc now come through to do their middle sectors. Sainz a 10th off of Hamilton after the middle sector. And Mick Schumacher first over the line with his flying lap. Leclerc goes purple in the middle sector. He's just over a 10th ahead of Hamilton at the moment, and he's 2 tenths clear of his teammate. Hamilton does a 1:19.6, purple in the final sector. What is Leclerc going to do? What is Sainz going to do now as Sainz goes through the final corner? Just waiting to see as Carlos Sainz. Will he go ahead of Lewis Hamilton? He does, 1:19.4. Leclerc has spun, but he's kept it on the road, so he's ruined that lap. And as we were saying, Lee, like, you know, I was just saying Leclerc was the man that was putting it together, but he's messed it up when he looked like he was going to take provisional pole as George Russell goes second ahead of Hamilton. Bottas goes in P4 ahead of the 2 Haas's, and he's only 2 tenths off of Hamilton, and Perez goes second just behind Sainz. What's Verstappen? This is going to be a mega lap, and he's gone fastest, Verstappen. Wow. There you go, 1:19.0 from Verstappen.
Oof.
Leclerc messing up his time. Leclerc was about 2 tenths ahead of his teammate, Lee, or a quarter of a second ahead of his teammate. So if Leclerc had put that together, he probably would have been right up there with Max as well. And that could be quite a costly error for Charles Leclerc, who looked like he may have been on provisional pole. As it stands, Verstappen is on provisional pole ahead of Sainz and Perez, then the 2 Mercedes. And yeah, completely lost it at the second part of that chicane, Lee.
Yeah, I mean, it puts Charles in a really difficult situation now if he goes out straight away and puts him out with the other drivers, or he tries to go for his 1 lap at the same time everyone else goes for the second. Or no, so it's such a difficult position which he really didn't need to put himself in.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm not sure if he's going to have enough time to do 2 runs, although he did pitch straight away, so he's saved himself the best part of about just under 2 minutes. So I don't know if he's got enough time to do 2. I don't know if he's got enough tyres to do 2 more runs. But as it stands, yeah, you're right. Charles Leclerc only he didn't even do a time, so he's P10 at the moment.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, what a lap from Max Verstappen. Mega in the final sector, and that's been a sector that Ferrari have pretty much owned all weekend long. And Max Verstappen has really delivered on that one. But Sainz P2 for Ferrari. So Ferrari do have a car up there, although you could argue probably not the one that they were hoping for at the very, very least. And the 2 Mercedes, when it's counted, they looked good, but they're still half a second off of Verstappen.
Yeah, I think that's a very big margin for Mercedes. They may close that gap on their second run, but do Mercedes really have half a second in their car? I would say very unlikely.
Well, this is it. I mean, we were talking throughout qualifying is how much more time did Mercedes have in their pocket, or were they pretty much showing their hand in full? It looks to be more the latter. But again, look, there's still time. You know, Russell put in a good lap. The best lap Lewis has put in all weekend as well in the 1:19. So, you know, he's done a good job there. But as we can see, when it's mattered most, the Ferraris and the Red Bulls still have a slight advantage to the 2 Mercs. Although Charles Leclerc, the World Championship leader, making a crucial mistake, which possibly has prevented him from getting provisional pole at this point. Still has 1 more run to go, so he could put that right, but he's got no room for error now.
Putting all the pressure on him for his final run.
And this is the thing for Leclerc. It's a driver that, whilst he has delivered, at least in qualifying and in certain situations where he's been under immense pressure throughout his career, he has delivered, but he's equally also had that tendency to make mistakes, and we saw one there, Lee. I suppose the good news for Leclerc, the gap between first and second is 3.5 tenths. That's more than enough of a gap to fit his Ferrari in there at the very least and get P2, which, granted, Ferrari probably need pole more than anyone else this weekend, but it's not the worst thing in the world if Leclerc puts that just behind Verstappen.
Oh yeah, it's not the worst thing in the world, but we all know how important a banker lap is in the sport. You could have yellow flags, you ruins your lap. Obviously, you can get traffic. That's like hit traffic in Q3, but there's so many things that can still ruin your 1 run. So a banker lap that has been proven many times over the years is so important to get.
Absolutely. I mean, it may be one of those where perhaps Ferrari do have to try and a little bit of a strategy to get the best lap time or to get a bit of a toe down to turn one, as Leclerc's the first man out. So he wants to get his run done whilst there's no traffic, although he probably will encounter traffic when he's on his flying lap. So we'll have to wait and see what they do. Bottas in P6, Lee. Just under 8 tenths of a second off Verstappen. I mean, that's amazing. Valtteri Bottas once again. Why should we be surprised? This guy's one of the best qualifiers on the grid. He's proven that to be literally most weekends when he was at Mercedes to be a tenth or two off of the greatest qualifier F1 has ever seen, and yet he's still proving that he's still got the speed.
Well, I mean, with Valtteri, it's one of those things of when he was at Mercedes of, we knew Valtteri was good, but it's like, Valtteri's just, he's just there. He's not doing enough to challenge Lewis. But you didn't get to see how good he was because he couldn't challenge his teammate as often as obviously he would have wanted. But in this car, he can show you how good a driver he actually is because he's dragging that car to where it is. That's not where Alfa Romeo are. So it's just so nice to see Valtteri performing so well.
Yeah, absolutely. It's great to see. Just on board with Carlos Sainz now, and it doesn't look like the Ferrari are going to do anything to try and maneuver. I mean, it may come to that point. Actually, no, probably won't matter in the end, actually. I'm just trying to think if it was possible for Ferrari to sort of manufacture a position where Sainz could get a nice toe off of Leclerc for his flying lap. But unless he catches him as Leclerc's almost about to start his flying lap. But it just goes to show, Lee, and this has been the repeating question on Charles Leclerc, that he's been mega quick all weekend. He's been the fastest driver all weekend. And when it matters most, these are the moments that count. And you know, as I said, in qualifying, he's delivered more often than not, but those mistakes are really going to cost him now. As he goes through the final corner now, about to start his lap, we're sort of having a drone shot of Carlos Sainz, so we can't see Leclerc, although I hope there we go, that's more like it. The directors picked up Charles Leclerc, so this is it. Mum spaghetti time for Charles Leclerc. Hasn't got a flying lap in. He needs to put it all together. He's been the fastest man all weekend, but this is when it matters most. Will he get that Ferrari on pole position, or will he come up short? Now, Lee, what are your thoughts? Do you reckon he can do it?
I still think Max is up the good for pole, I'm afraid, Adam.
No, fair enough. Leclerc's just a 25 thousandths off Verstappen in Sector 1, so he's a little behind, but considering where Ferrari have been in that first sector, that's not a bad opening sector for Leclerc. Carlos Sainz does not improve in Sector 1. He's 2 tenths down on Verstappen. So it looks like already Carlos Sainz may not be able to put it together, but can he get that Ferrari on the front row, or at least in P3? I have to wait and see. What's Leclerc's middle sector like? Oh, this is a mega lap from Leclerc. He's a quarter of a second up on Verstappen. In the middle sector, 3 tenths faster than Max was the first time round. We'll have to wait and see what Max does later on. We'll have to see, can Leclerc keep it together in the final sector where he's been mega fast in the Ferrari? Sainz is only a tenth off Verstappen, so he's found some time. That first sector's really cost him. Verstappen, is he having team radio? Is having a problem as Leclerc comes across the line now. He's kept it all together. Is this pole position? It is pole position. It's 1:18.7 for Leclerc, 3 tenths faster than Verstappen. But can Verstappen respond? Team radio's happen. I don't know if Max is having problems, so you'll have to let me know in the chat if he is. As Sainz now comes across the line, can it get it on the front row? No, he cannot. He actually lost time to Leclerc. He's just missed out on the front row. Verstappen is pitting. Verstappen's got a problem. So Leclerc's on provisional pole. Verstappen doesn't look like he's going to be able to respond. Team radio saying box, box. Russell was purple in Sector 1. He's a few tenths off Leclerc in Sector 2. Can Russell get the Mercedes on the front row? He certainly looks like he might be able to split the Ferraris and Red Bulls as Perez doesn't improve. So Russell could get this Mercedes on the front row here, Lee. What's he going to do? As he comes across the line, where's this going to go? P4. So he does get ahead of Perez on the second row. Where is Sir Lewis Hamilton? Where is he? Is he going to improve? It doesn't look like he is. I think that's going to be the end of qualifying. Just waiting for formal confirmation. But it looks like Charles Leclerc has delivered at the death despite the mistake that he made. And it looks like Charles Leclerc has proven a lot of people wrong there. Mostly myself, because I didn't think he had it in him. But once again, despite the fact that I backed him, I had my doubts there, Lee. But once again, Charles Leclerc, one lap, one opportunity. And boy, did he absolutely nail it. What a lap. The only man in the 118s.
And we did question if we were going to get 118, and there we go.
Well, we got one, but what a lap. And Carlos Sainz, if he'd had a better opening part of the lap, he could have got that Ferrari on the front row. I'm not sure what problem Verstappen had. I'll have to, I'm going to have a scroll through Twitter to see if someone actually says, because we haven't got the audio. So did he make a mistake? Just watching the replay of Verstappen through the first two corners. What happened? Well, there's a lot of vibrations on that car. I wonder if something sort of played up on there. It must be something mechanical because he slowed down very, very quickly. Let's have a look. Max saying he has no power, Lee. So he had a power issue. And to be fair, that car did look a little bit slow. But, I mean, there you go. The fine margins. But, special mention for George Russell. P4 in that Mercedes. What a lap from him. Yeah. And at one point, if a better final sector, he might have been able to get that on the front row.
Yeah, not quite the upset that I was predicting, but it's enough of an upset that we will have Red Bull and Ferrari concerned for tomorrow.
And I've just realised, Lee, my prediction nearly came through. If Sergio Perez if Hamilton had got into P5, which he might have been able to do, but obviously had issues on that second run, I'd have had a clean sweep. Look at that. 4 out. I mean, that's got to be something. 4 out of 5. That's not bad. In that
that's
order,
probably the closest we managed to get yet.
I think that's the closest any of us are going to get now that Mercedes have joined the mix. But, I mean, look, fair play to Mercedes. It just shows that pace is there in that car. But obviously when the two leading teams turn their engines up, or particularly Ferrari and Leclerc when he's on it, we don't know what Verstappen would have done. And, if Verstappen had power, would he have been able to get that car fastest? I mean, nearly 3.5 attempts. That's a lot of time to make up. But, man, that would have been fun to watch. But nonetheless, just as a recap, it's Charles Leclerc on pole position for Ferrari, delivering at the death when he needed to most, managed to put it together. Max Verstappen, his championship rival, in P2. Carlos Sainz in P3 for Ferrari, narrowly missing out on a front row at his home circuit. George Russell with his best qualifying of the season for Mercedes. 6.5 tenths off Leclerc in the end, but I think Mercedes will be very happy with that. Perez just under 7 tenths off in P5. Lewis Hamilton, 7.5 tenths off in P6. Bottas, P7. Magnussen, P8 for Haas. Ricciardo, P9. Surprisingly, the better of the two McLarens after Norris going out. And Mick Schumacher recovering in P10. So, Lee, what did you make of qualifying? Is this a session? I think Ferrari needed that lap to go through from Leclerc.
Oh, they needed that lap massively. I mean, from the championship perspective, Max is on the ascendancy and closing that gap thick and fast. So they need that pole just to be able to keep Max behind them. That's going to be the real question for tomorrow is, A, can Charles keep Max behind him? B, can Carlos help Charles in that fight?
Yeah, absolutely. And, we saw Ferrari had a front row in Miami and Sainz was a little bit compromised on the start, which allowed Verstappen to get through and attack his teammate. Now the role is reversed and Sainz will be looking to attack Verstappen in P2. I mean, I've got to say, I think if this weekend is going to go down the way that I hope it does for Ferrari's sake at least, the start could be very critical for Carlos Sainz. I mean, it would do wonders for him if he can get alongside Verstappen and, get ahead of him to protect his teammate. But at the same time, and he's going to have the home crowd in front of him as well. So,
you should just look at what Fernando did a few years ago and just go on the outside and
well, this is it.
lead into the turn one.
P3 is not the worst place to start from, it must be said. And, you've got Leclerc there. Leclerc's going to need a good start as well because he hasn't had the best getaway the last couple of races. And Verstappen has been very good off the line. So, certainly looks like there could be fireworks. And maybe George Russell, you can't rule him out with that straight line speed in that Mercedes. It's certainly going to be a factor tomorrow. And now we've got Sir Lewis in there in Mercedes in the mix. But, I mean, as a sort of Mercedes fan, Lee, where Mercedes are ultimately, at the very least, off the best car, 6 tenths off the pace, and they're certainly in the mix. Would you say Mercedes are very happy with that? Ultimately, even though they still have a little bit more work to do when it comes to unleashing the full performance of that car?
I think they'll be pretty happy with that. I mean, so far this season, it hasn't been the best of qualifiers. It's been performed better in the race, but they've closed the gap to Ferrari and Red Bull. They obviously don't purpose as much, which has obviously been their main Achilles heel. So I think they'll be very happy with what they've done so far.
Absolutely, yeah.
And it just opens up the options for them for tomorrow. I mean, it may be a bit far for them to potentially get a race win, but they're there enough to be an annoyance to Ferrari and Red Bull and upset their strategy, that they potentially may not disappear and be able to get a free pit stop ahead of the Mercedes like they have done so far this season.
Absolutely,
So
yeah. Absolutely.
the Mercedes will be in their pit window.
Absolutely.
And with that straight line speed, that could be a nuisance for strategy and could become a deciding factor for the actual race winner tomorrow.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, there's a lot of reason for Mercedes to be happy. Tomorrow is going to be the real test to see where their race pace is, because I think, it's fine being fast in qualifying, but the race pace is where it's going to matter most. And from what we saw on Friday, they looked like they were at least half a second off Verstappen, who arguably probably has the best race car. How that will transpire tomorrow, we'll have to wait and see. We'll have to wait and see what Ferrari can do, because, of course, there was a lot of concern about their race pace being on par with more Mercedes than Red Bull, despite Mattia Binotto saying he was more concerned about Red Bull than Mercedes. So obviously he believes Ferrari got that sorted. But right now, qualifying, Leclerc's ticked that box. The race pace of that Ferrari, we'll have to wait and see what it can do. Have they found something to sort of bring them back into the Red Bull fold, or will they be struggling to defend against two cars possibly that have significantly better straight line speed than they do?
Yeah, and it's also does depend on what Max's issue is regarding his power. Obviously, it's nothing too bad and something that obviously doesn't require an engine or replacement parts, but we'll obviously find that out later on when Red Bull release further information.
Absolutely. Florian in the chat saying, where did Mick finish? Mick finished P10 in the end. So he will start in the top 10 with Kevin Magnussen. And as I said, quick note on Haas before we sign off, Lee. It's quite interesting. They've hardly upgraded that car at all compared to everyone else, and yet they've managed to get both cars in the top 10 of all the teams that look like they might struggle this weekend because of the fact they had no upgrades, and they're the ones that have actually delivered.
Yeah, well, as you mentioned earlier, that this circuit rewards a good car, a good design concept, and it just proves you how good a concept that Haas actually have there, that with no upgrades, they're still in the mix.
Absolutely right. We'll have to see how that transpires on Sunday if that turns into points. But just about to sign off, guys, just a reminder of the headline. Charles Leclerc at the death needed to put one lap together to salvage his qualifying, and he delivered a potential championship performance from a champion's performance, I should say, from a driver when it mattered most. Verstappen in P2, Sainz P3, George Russell in P4 for Mercedes. Great job from them, solidifying the upsurge in performance from them. Perez P5, Sir Lewis Hamilton only P6, but certainly not far off. And of course, we have the rest falling in line after that. We had Bottas P7, then we had Kevin Magnussen P8, Norris P9. Sorry, not Norris, Ricciardo P9, I should say. Norris didn't make it through to Q3. Sorry about that. Force a habit, these things. And Mick Schumacher P10. So I've absolutely butchered that one. So all that's left to say, guys, thank you so much for joining us for the live stream DNF1 Watchalong of qualifying. And if you enjoyed it, make sure to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and stick around for future podcasts going forward. Lee, sorry, just looking in the comments, actually. By the way, what is your opinion to Seb and Mick crash in Miami? Well, we talked about this on the Miami podcast, so feel free to check it out in more detail, Florian. But I thought that was one of those that I think perhaps Mick went for it, and I think Seb could have given him a little bit room, but you could lay blame on both parts, really, for that one. It was one of those incidents that could have been avoided, but that happens sometimes racing. But anyway, look, guys, it's been an absolute thrill watching this qualifying session with you. I hope you guys enjoyed watching it along with us. As I said already, please subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Really helps us out a lot. But until next time, guys, we have been DNF1, and we will see you in the next DNF1 video. So in the meantime, stay safe.